Welcome, everyone. We're diving deep today into mental health. We've got a ton of research piled up here, ready to uncover some amazing insights about the brain and how it all works, behavior and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be tackling those big theories everyone's heard of, like dopamine and schizophrenia,
Oh, yeah, the dopamine theory.
and then serotonin and depression. But we'll also be going beyond that, looking at the role of genetics and epigenetics, the impact of stress, even how lifestyle choices can make a difference.
Okay, so like a holistic view.
Yeah, it's all connected,
Yeah.
in ways that might really surprise you.
All right, so much to cover. Let's jump right in. This idea of dopamine and schizophrenia is something we hear about all the time, especially those chemical imbalances in the brain. What's the real deal there?
Well, the dopamine theory basically says that too much dopamine activity in certain parts of the brain is what leads to those schizophrenia symptoms. And, this idea came about because those first generation antipsychotic meds, the ones that block dopamine receptors, they actually work pretty well in reducing those symptoms.
So blocking dopamine helps. Does that mean people with schizophrenia just have way too much dopamine in their brains? Is it that simple?
I wish it were that simple, but it's more complicated than that. While dopamine definitely is involved, it's not the whole story. Like some newer research is finding that in other areas of the brain, people with schizophrenia might actually have lower dopamine activity.
So it's not just a straightforward too much dopamine situation.
Right. It's more like this complicated dance of dopamine levels going on in different parts of the brain. It's not just about the overall amount.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those other symptoms that often come with schizophrenia, like apathy and social withdrawal? Do those fit into the dopamine theory too?
Not necessarily. Those are what we call negative symptoms, and they don't seem to be directly related to how dopamine's functioning,
Yeah.
at least not in the same way as the positive symptoms like hallucinations and delusions.
Oh, I see.
And this is one of the reasons why medication alone sometimes isn't enough. Schizophrenia is just way too complex to be solved by just tweaking one chemical.
Makes sense. Feels like we're just scratching the surface here. What about the role of genetics? Does that play into schizophrenia at all?
Absolutely. Research shows there's a really strong genetic component. Like if you've got a close relative with schizophrenia, your risk goes up significantly. But even then, it's not like a guaranteed thing. It's not like having one specific gene means you're definitely going to develop it.
So it's more like genes create a vulnerability, kind of like a predisposition, but there needs to be something else that flips the switch, right?
Exactly. That's where epigenetics comes in. Epigenetics is this super interesting field that looks at how our environment and our life experiences can actually change how our genes express themselves. They can be turned on or off without changing the actual DNA sequence.
Oh, wow. So even if you're born with genes that could make you more susceptible to schizophrenia, certain experiences or things in your environment could either increase or decrease the chance of those genes becoming active and actually leading to the illness.
That's the general idea. It's a super fascinating area of research. It helps us see how much our nature and nurture, our genes and our environment really work together to shape our mental health. It's not just about the genes we inherit, but also the lives we live and the world around us.
It's all starting to feel so interconnected, genes, environment, brain chemistry. It's a lot to wrap your head around. Okay, let's shift gears for a bit. Let's talk about serotonin, another big name we always hear in relation to depression. Is there a similar theory for serotonin and depression, like the dopamine theory for schizophrenia?
There is. It's called the serotonin theory of depression, and it basically says that low levels of serotonin in the brain are what cause those depression symptoms. And just like with the dopamine theory, this idea came about because we saw that meds that increase serotonin, like SSRIs, they can actually help treat depression.
So is it really as straightforward as not having enough serotonin? Like, is that all there is to depression?
You know, I wish it were that easy, but unfortunately it's more complicated than that. Serotonin definitely plays a crucial role in regulating mood. But that whole chemical imbalance idea, the idea that low serotonin is the only cause of depression, well, newer research has been challenging that a bit.
Really? So if it's not just about serotonin levels, why are those medications, especially SSRIs, prescribed so often for depression?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers are still trying to figure out. While those SSRIs do increase serotonin, how they actually work to relieve those depression symptoms is probably a lot more complex. It might involve changes in the brain structure and how other neurotransmitters act over time.
So like with schizophrenia, it's more than just one single neurotransmitter being messed up.
Exactly. Mental illness is incredibly complex. It's way too simplistic to say that it all boils down to just one brain chemical being out of whack. There are so many other things at play, like genetics, stressful life events, even physical health issues.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of stress, it's something we all experience. But how does it actually affect our mental well-being? That's something I'd love to dig into.
Well, stress itself is a natural response. It's actually essential for survival. It helps us deal with challenges and threats. But when stress becomes chronic, that's when it can really start to mess with both our mental and physical health.
So it's like if your car alarm keeps going off even when there's no danger, eventually it just wears you down, right?
Exactly. Our bodies can handle short bursts of stress, but when that stress response stays active for too long, it can trigger all sorts of negative effects.
Okay, so we definitely want to avoid chronic stress. But how do we do that?
Yeah.
Especially in a world that feels like it's getting more and more stressful all the time.
It's not about toughening up or becoming some kind of stress superhero. Everyone has a different limit for how much stress they can handle. And that's where the stress vulnerability model comes in. It helps us understand how our individual vulnerabilities, things shaped by genetics, early life experiences, all of that, interact with stress and ultimately affect our mental health.
So it's like some people are just naturally more sensitive to stress than others.
Yeah, and that's not a weakness. It's just part of what makes us unique. The stress vulnerability model shows us why some people might actually thrive under pressure while others really struggle, even when they're dealing with similar stressful
I
situations.
see.
It's about recognizing that we all have different breaking points when it comes to stress, and those breaking points are influenced by a whole bunch of factors.
Wow, that's really shifting my perspective on stress and resilience. It's not about just toughening up, but understanding our own vulnerabilities and finding healthy ways to deal with stress before it pushes us over the edge.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore more in the next part of our deep dive. We'll go deeper into the stress vulnerability model, talk about how substance use affects the brain, and uncover that often hidden connection between mental and physical health.
I'm really looking forward to unpacking all of that. But for now, listeners, let these initial insights sink in. We'll be right back to continue our journey into this fascinating world of mental health. Welcome back, everyone. Last time we really dug into those complex worlds of schizophrenia and depression, going beyond that whole chemical imbalance thing you always hear.
Yeah, we even touched on epigenetics and how powerful our experiences can be in actually changing how our genes work.
Right. Like we were saying, it's almost like some people have bigger buckets for stress than others, and some, well, their buckets overflow a lot easier.
That's a perfect way to put it. And knowing your own stress bucket, that's so important for staying mentally healthy. But for today, let's switch gears a bit.
Right.
Let's talk about substance use and how it affects the brain, especially alcohol and those long-term impacts.
Substance abuse, yeah, we all know it's bad, but let's break it down. How does something like alcohol actually damage the brain? Like, what's really happening?
Well, when we talk about alcohol-related brain damage, or ARBD for short,
ARBD.
we're not just talking about being drunk. It's the damage that builds up over time from heavy drinking that really does the harm.
So like a car engine that's not taken care of. Eventually, it just stops working right.
Exactly. And ARBD can show up in a few different ways. One is something called alcohol-related dementia.
Dementia.
Yeah, it causes a decline in all those cognitive functions like memory, thinking, judgment, all of that.
So basically, it's like other kinds of dementia, but caused by alcohol abuse.
Exactly. Then there's this other thing called alcohol amnesic syndrome. It mainly affects short-term memory.
So you can't remember things.
Right. It makes it really hard to form new memories, which makes everyday life a real struggle.
Almost like being stuck in Groundhog Day, huh? You just can't hold on to new information.
Yeah, it can be really disorienting and frustrating. And then there's the most serious one, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. This one often comes from not having enough thiamine, which is a
Right.
vitamin the brain needs to work properly.
Okay.
And it's often seen in people who've been abusing alcohol for a long time.
So it's not just the alcohol directly messing up the brain, but it's also all the nutritional stuff that goes missing when someone drinks too much.
You got it. Wernicke-Korsakoff can cause a whole bunch of neurological problems, like
Wow.
confusion, memory loss, trouble with coordination, even paralysis of the eye muscles. It
Wow.
really shows you how substance use can have these ripple effects that go way beyond just getting drunk.
It's a huge reminder that substance use, especially with alcohol, it's not just a social problem, it's a serious health issue that can really impact the brain.
Absolutely. Now let's zoom out a little and talk about the impact of mental illness on physical health over long periods of time. This is something that often gets overlooked.
I'm glad we're talking about this. It's easy to get caught up in the mental and emotional side of things, but we don't always hear about the physical toll it takes.
Yeah, you're right. Mental and physical health are so intertwined, and when someone's dealing with mental illness for a long time, it can really increase their risk of developing other physical health problems.
So we can't just focus on the mental and emotional aspects, but also think about taking care of our physical health too.
Exactly. If you've got a chronic mental illness like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, you're at a higher risk for things like heart disease, diabetes, respiratory problems, even some cancers.
Wow, I didn't realize the connection was that strong. Is that because people with mental illness might not take care of themselves as well, like smoking or not paying attention to their physical health?
Lifestyle choices definitely play a part, but there's more to it than that. Some of the meds used to treat mental illness can have side effects that make you more likely to develop those conditions. Plus, there's this thing called diagnostic overshadowing. That's when physical symptoms in people with mental illness get brushed off as just part of their condition instead of being looked at as potential separate medical problems.
So they're not only dealing with the mental illness itself, but then they also might face these extra hurdles when it comes to getting proper care for their physical health too.
It's a tough situation, and it really shows why we need a more integrated approach to healthcare, one that sees mental and physical well-being as connected and equally important.
Makes sense. So you mentioned lifestyle factors earlier, and I'm curious to explore that more. We've been talking about all this complex biology, but how much control do we actually have over our mental and physical health through the choices we make and how we live our lives? It feels like we've really gone deep in this deep dive. We've explored the brain, genetics, stress, substance use. It's clear that mental illness is so much more complicated than just those chemical imbalances people talk about.
You're absolutely right. But with all this complexity, there's also this really empowering message.
Okay, what's up?
Even though we can't control every single thing about our mental health, we can make choices that influence our well-being. Lifestyle choices can make a real difference.
That's good to hear. So we're not just stuck with whatever biology throws at us.
Exactly. It's not just about the biology, it's about how we live our lives too. That's where things start to feel a little more hopeful. We're not just passive, at the mercy of our genes or our past. We have the power to make changes, and that's huge.
I like that. So what kind of lifestyle choices are we talking about? I know people say things like exercise and diet matter, but what's the science behind it?
Well, let's start with what we eat. Think of your brain as this high-powered machine, right? And like any machine, it needs the right fuel to run smoothly.
Okay, I'm following.
So eating lots of fruits and veggies, whole grains, lean proteins, that gives your brain the nutrients it needs for things like mood regulation, focus, and just thinking clearly.
So cutting back on the junk food and soda, it's not just about looking good, it's about feeding our brains what they need to function.
Exactly. What you put in your body directly affects your brain chemistry. It impacts how those neurotransmitters are produced and the overall health of your brain. Like omega-3 fatty acids, those are really important.
Threes, yeah, I've heard of those.
You find them in fatty fish, walnuts, things like that. They help keep those brain cell membranes healthy and they fight inflammation too.
Okay, that makes sense. What about exercise? We all know it's good for the body, but how does it help our minds?
Oh, exercise is amazing. It's
Hmm.
honestly like a wonder drug for both your mental and physical health. It releases those feel-good endorphins.
Yeah.
It lowers those stress hormones like cortisol, helps you sleep better, and it even helps your brain grow new brain cells.
Wait, hold on. Exercise actually grows new brain cells. How does that even work?
It's called neurogenesis. Studies have shown that regular exercise, especially the aerobic kind, can actually make the hippocampus bigger.
The hippocampus.
Yeah, it's the part of the brain that's really important for memory and learning. It's never too late to start getting those brain benefits from being physically active.
All right, I'm convinced. Time to dust off those running shoes. Okay, what about sleep? I know we all need it, but how does it tie into mental well-being?
Sleep is absolutely crucial for mental health. Think of it like this. It's when your brain gets to recharge, sort through all those memories, and clean up any waste products.
A brain cleanse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're not sleeping enough, it can really mess with your mood, concentration, how you handle emotions. Even your immune system takes a hit.
Wow, so those 7 or 8 hours of good sleep, it's not just about feeling well rested. It's about giving our brains the time they need to do their job.
That's it. Think of it like running a marathon without any breaks or fuel. Eventually, your body would just give out.
Right.
Your brain's the same way. Making sleep a priority is seriously one of the best things you can do for your mental health.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We've talked about food, exercise, and sleep.
Right.
What about managing stress? We talked earlier about how bad chronic stress can be. So how do we keep those stress levels in check?
Stress management is super important. There are all kinds of techniques that can help. Mindfulness practices like meditation can really calm the mind and lower those stress hormones. Deep breathing can help too. And don't underestimate the power of nature. Just getting outside can do wonders for stress, mood, and even how well you think.
I've definitely felt that. So it's about finding what works best for you, right?
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution to stress.
You got it. Try different things and see what feels good. And remember, connecting with people is important too. Having strong social connections can help protect you from stress, lift your mood, and make you feel like you belong.
So it's not just about how many friends you have, but how connected you feel to them.
Exactly.
Mm.
Spend time with people who make you feel good, who support you, who make you feel like you belong. Those relationships are really powerful.
This has been eye-opening. We've explored the science of mental illness, the brain chemistry, the impact on physical health, all of that.
It has been quite a journey.
But I'm walking away feeling more hopeful, knowing that we can actually take steps to improve our mental well-being.
It's not all out of our control. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with this thought. You're not alone in this. Mental health is a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, challenges, but also victories.
Ups and downs.
Exactly. And the more we understand how those biological factors, life experiences, and lifestyle choices all work together, the better we can navigate that journey.
With more awareness and compassion for ourselves and others. And remember, listeners, it's okay to ask for help when you need it. Talk to a therapist. Join a support group. Lean on those you trust. Healing is possible. You can grow and live a really fulfilling life.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep talking about mental health. That's how we break down stigma, create understanding, and build a world where mental well-being is valued and supported.
Until next time, everyone, stay curious, stay kind, and keep diving deeper into the amazing world of the human mind.